Okay, this is the next episode of my book, Not a Victim, a Survivor: Life Beyond Domestic Violence and Rape. It's the first book in my series, Life Beyond Silence. And I have two other books. And I guess I'm kind of hoping that this podcast will bring some closure to the other two books so that I can get them up on Amazon as well. It's been hard for me to put my life out there. I did the book a long time ago, and after all the years that it was out making the rounds, I decided to put um, a copy of my own up on Amazon, and then, which was several years ago, and then now I've decided to do the podcast so people can hear directly from me, and maybe I can elaborate on some of the parts of the book. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to me. I'll be glad to do my best to answer them. So let's get started. Excuse me. Instead of growing closer, these nights out are actually pulling us farther apart. And maybe if we stop, we'll be able to save what we still have. Yes, I said all of that, but I didn't say it to Kyle. I stayed and I kept on looking. What I had said before was Chantel, the girl I was hanging out with at that time. She pretty well had her pick of men, and she met a guy pretty quickly. And I wanted what she had, which was someone that made her feel like a woman, showed her passion and excitement the way that because she was married, and her husband and her had been having problems. My husband and me had been having problems, and she found this guy and took to him, and I wanted something similar. To be honest, I remember what I was thinking. I was thinking I can meet somebody, it can be a fling, and I can go home to Kyle, and then pretty soon we'll be going home to the States, and then I can make my mind up whether or not a divorce is in our future. That's what I was thinking. Well, of course, it's harder than what it looks because when you get involved with anybody, and I've heard plenty of military wives do that. They kind of have flings and then they stay with their military husbands and they move around and they never see the same person ever again. But I'm not that type. I never was that type. I was always looking for my prince. I was always looking for someone to be my knight in shining armor. And so I literally couldn't hook up with someone and just let it be like that. I was always going to have feelings involved. And another thing, in the book, yeah, I said I didn't say it to Kyle. But even Kyle to this day could tell you that I told him, this is not a good idea. Me going out separately from you is a really bad idea. At the time that this was kind of all going on, I had dropped quite a bit of weight from having my last daughter. And I was pretty skinny. And I felt good. And I felt good about myself. And I looked good. And I wasn't Chantel. I wasn't a tall Amazon looking like blonde that could get anybody in the bar. I was short and dark headed. And yeah, I guess kind of like the girl next door, but not. I mean, I was older than most of the military men because a lot of military men are fresh out of high school. So I was kind of excited by being, let's see, how old was I? I was, hmm, I want to say I was like 29. Yes, it's 29. And so most of them were in their early 20s, really early 20s, and it would practically have to be somebody at least closer to my age in some way, shape, or form. So, like I said, at first thought, if I was to find someone, I would be able to keep it under control. Have possibly an affair, like a 7 year itch kind of thing that men are supposed to go through, and not really get emotionally involved. Just get it out of my system. My second thought was that Kyle and I would make it once we got back to the States anyway. So I would just have a fling now, but stay with Kyle. And when we got back to the States, I could decide if I wanted to file for divorce or if it was finally over. I was at a crossroads, and although I had doubts as which way to go, I felt with all honesty that Kyle and I would never be able to stay together. There was no road that could lead us back to what we once meant to each other. Don't get me wrong, Kyle and I had a lot of good times together, especially early on in our relationship, and we had seemed to have a lot of common interests. After all, we never lacked for topics to discuss. We traveled around with the kids, sightseeing, walking through castles, amusement parks, restaurants, and flea markets. We took the kids to street festivals and parks. On weekends, you might typically find Kyle and me at Gabby and Mark's house, staying up till midnight or early in the morning hours, just playing cards. I really thought things were okay until the end of '88, and then it seemed to fall apart. Kyle was disinterested with making me happy, and he started telling me to do stuff without him. Our sex life began to get dull and less enjoyable, and we unfortunately drifted apart. And believe it or not, I really did desperately want to hold on to my marriage. But soon everything he did turned my stomach. I became disgusted with him, and likewise, he seemed to just sit refusing to converse with me. I thought for a long time he was having an affair and was somehow feeling guilty, but then I became cold and I really didn't care if he was or if he wasn't having a fling. I just knew we had lost whatever we had, and I had no way or no idea how long we had until it would be over. So, kind of giving you a heads up about that. So I remember, like, when Gabby and Mark were there, we did stuff as a foursome. And all that stuff about amusement parks and castles, most of which we did with Gabby and Mark. Yeah, there was some outings that we did on our own, but most of them involved Gabby and Mark. And when Gabby left, it was like I lost my best friend. She knew that we weren't, like, really happy, but neither was she. And she kept me on an even keel. She didn't talk about doing anybody, out of her marriage. And there was no reason for me to do it if my best friend wasn't, like, doing that. Yeah, we flirted a little bit and we talked a lot of shit. But it was just really minor. and we knew we were going to be with our husbands, and we knew we had each other. We had each other to talk everything out. But when she left, it was just me and Kyle. Me, Kyle, and 3 kids. 2 smaller children, and, uh, well, my oldest wasn't that small anymore, but my baby was getting bigger, and it was hard. It was really, really hard because, and Kyle was a good dad, but he was just disinterested. And I would catch him, you know, doing things behind my back, like getting a porno movie, and the movie store asking me where it was and telling me it was late and how much I had to pay. And then I would find out that he had been, I would ask him and he would tell me. He would say, "Yeah, I did. I bought one. I took it to work and it's at work. And I, you know, gave myself a hand job watching it." And then I found out about the magazines. And then I found out about that he had, I don't know when, but he had gone to the red light district. I also found out that he was at the bars talking it up as though, you know, he's so good in bed. And he'd even like gotten to where he would jack off and basically do it on my butt or leg or something while I was sleeping, and it just got to me. I didn't want that. I wanted someone that loved me, that, told me how beautiful I was, that told me that I was the only one for them. And it had gotten to where when he was awake, he hardly took a bath. He sat and moped around. He didn't talk to me. He read books and played military games. He didn't do really anything with me after Gabby left. And we drifted apart. That's the honest truth. And I remember when I did tell him it was over, he tried really hard to say, "Here's a necklace. I really want you to stay with me. Please don't leave me." And I felt bad, but when somebody tells you that they're done, they're done. And I, in a way, was just like his first wife. I decided this wasn't for me, and I told him I wanted a divorce. And I know it hurt him. I know it did. But I tried. I really did try to tell him, you know, this isn't what I like. Don't do this. I find out that you're doing these things behind my back. That's not cool. It was really difficult. Looking back at our life together, I'm sorry things didn't work out. I cared for him. I loved him, and still to this day, we have a common bond, which is my youngest daughter. Although we don't see much of each other, we have managed to keep our friendship, and even to this day, I'm very thankful of that. Side note, it I'm reading this right at the same time that he just got married. He just married somebody, and actually I like her. She's very nice to me, and they seem happy together, and I'm happy for them. Maybe he's changed. To me, no, he might not have changed. I don't know, and neither do I care. It's not none of my business. But they seem happy together, and they've been together for a pretty good time. I don't know exactly how long, but it was it it wasn't like it was a quick marriage. They've been together for a long time, and now they just got married, and actually they're on their honeymoon right as I'm talking about this. And I'm happy for him. I am. And I hope for her sake he has changed. I hope he takes a bath. I hope that he doesn't sit in the bathtub for hours on end not washing. I hope he doesn't eat a whole bowl of cereal, and I hope he's not a brooder that just sits there. I hope he actually is involved in everything and makes her happy. She says he does, so that's all I can believe is maybe he's changed. I hope he has. But when I see him, like when I see him without her, nah, I don't know. I don't necessarily think he's changed all that much, but I wish her the best, and I wish him the best. And I just wanted to say that. Okay, let's continue. So, what ended up happening, to make it short, is I continued to go out. He continued to go out. I remember I was looking really good. I'm not saying I was a beauty queen or anything, but after being pregnant, after having 3 kids, now you gotta remember, I was 29 and had 3 kids. I looked good. I was wearing sexy lingerie under like shirts. I, it was it was like 1989. So I was dancing my nights away, drinking. I went to concerts. I did a lot of things. And I was enjoying life. And I looked at it as though, well, this is what he wanted. I go out one night, he goes out one night. I don't know what he does. He doesn't know what I do. Is it helping our marriage? No, absolutely not. It is in no way helping our marriage. But at least I'm happier. At least I'm not sitting at home really disgusted by him. At least I'm getting out. And when I am at home and it's a weekday or whatever, I just tune him out. And I'm sure he does the same, tunes me out. Anyway, I remember the first time I saw him. I was out with Chantel at a bar, just a typical night. He was walking, he walked in and he was wearing a black leather trench coat. Now that makes him sound like he's a serial killer these days. But back then, it was pretty cool. He was kind of like a rock and roll, dark, mysterious guy. Except he had blonde hair, which he dyed. But when he walked in, he had a black leather trench coat. He was truly dressed to the nines. He wore a dangle type earring, slashed up jeans, pair of black leather gloves with the fingers cut out. He had a beer in his hand and a cigarette that hung from his lip. I remember he moved around the room as though he owned it, and everyone talked to him. And now that I'm reading that, I can remember it just like it was yesterday. And it was just like that. In the 80s, 1989, there I had been looking my best, and I was looking around the room of all really young GIs with no hair, And most of the young GIs get really drunk, like obsessively drunk. So, yeah, they're not even in your. I guess they don't even catch your eye because they're so drunk they're falling down. But I looked around the room, and when he came in and looked that way, and he did, he was dressed up. He was dressed up. He had a black leather trench coat that he quickly kind of laid around, but he laid it over a chair or whatever. But he, I don't know. It's kind. It back then it seemed like charming, like Prince Charming. But now I look back and I think it was a fake, made up um, stick. I mean, it was something that he learned. Well, I know all this because I ended up marrying the guy, but he learned all this from somebody that he worked with. He'd been married before, which I later learned, and she'd broke his heart, and he was just an ordinary soldier then. But this guy had taken him under his wing, told him to do this, do that. Next thing you know, he developed a stick. He had a persona, and he changed into that. And I don't know if it was a slow process or one day he went from normal GI to hump. I don't know. But yeah, he's changed into this hot, good looking, suave, charming, hot guy. Pure and simple. Anyway, girls were kissing him on the cheek and giving him a hug, an acknowledgement with simply a hug, while the guys in the room seemed to lift their beers and toast to him. I thought, no doubt, he's some kind of man greeting that, like, he's a regular here. So evidently, everybody knows him. He had a presence about him. Who was he? Who was this man everyone seemed to know except me? After all, I had been going up there for a good bit. Yeah, I didn't go up there every night, I'll admit that. But I went up there at least once on the weekend. Whether it was Friday, Saturday, it was closed on Sunday. At least I think it was. But I remember I would go up there. It might not have been. I don't remember. But I would go up there one of the weekend nights. And I had never really seen him before. He might have passed in, but not that I could remember. I would remember him. So when I saw him, I thought, well, he could be a soldier that had been out on duty and now he's back in town, and so, you know, that's why they're all taken with him. Anyway, he had a presence about him, and he was young and good looking. I watched him as I was playing pool. I noticed once he went out to dance, and he was really a good dancer. That kind of man I had fantasized about for so long. The kind of man that sweeps you off your feet. Here was a man that could dance, and not just good, but extremely good. And I had always been a really good dancer. And now I found myself wanting to dance with him. Okay, that's not surprising in any way. I remember how I felt when I first saw him, and not in my wildest dreams would I have ever imagined that my heart could pound so hard. There was something magical about him, something magnetic, something special. It was like a tractor beam drawing me to him. But it wasn't only me. A crowd surrounded him. It was like constantly people were around him. His personality was of a man that seemed sure of himself. Now later, again, I learned most of that was a stick. which to this day he still projects that stick personality that he learned so long ago. But from his mother, after being married to him and stuff, his mother said he was never like that as a kid. He was more shy. He had like really curly locks. And he had a few friends, but he wasn't like a chick magnet. And he completely redid himself in the military. And so I still remember her telling me those stories. Anyway, his personality was a man that seemed sure of himself. I remember when I found out his nickname was Doc. It seemed to fit perfectly. I can remember exactly how the opportunity came into play. But before the end of the night, or I can't remember exactly how the opportunity came into play, but before the end of the night, I was dancing with him. In any case, that is how it all started. A simple dance. A dance that would change both of our lives virtually forever. So, yeah, it did. I mean, yeah, I was taken with him the minute I saw him. But when I was on the dance floor, he noticed me. I remember it took me fairly easy, although sometimes I knew it was like a game to him. Like he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, ready to eat me alive if I dared take a breath. He had a girlfriend, and I knew he wanted to keep me in the shadows as to not make waves with her. Although I thought this was very low, to play with us like pawns against each other, but in some way I found it intriguing. After all, he was a single man, and I wanted to keep his options open until he knew which one of us he wanted. You have to remember I wasn't a free woman myself, just a desperate one trying to find happiness. Now I'm gonna say in this part, for one, I didn't know which one was his girlfriend because there was a lot of German girls in there, probably a few American wives, and or maybe American women military, but most of them were German girls, and there was a lot of them, and a lot of them were always around him. Now here's the thing: most of them I could see with him. I looked around. I thought, oh, wonder if that's her, because he told me he had a girlfriend. And then I would see another one. I'd be like, oh, wonder if that's her. Well, let me just put this to rest right now before we get to this part. I did not know that let's see, I was 29, so he was 24. I did not know that none of those was his girlfriend. Actually, his girlfriend was 16 years old and a German girl. And she didn't really come to the bar. She didn't. She, I guess, had a job, had a mother, lived with her mother, and had strict rules. Or at least semi-strict rules, because obviously he was with her. But I didn't know that right at first. I had no idea. All he told me was he had a girlfriend and he didn't want to make waves. So we kept it pretty simple. We talked, we danced, we had a beer or two, we flirted, but nothing major at first. I was just infatuated. And he was probably a big ass player because that's the way I felt. I felt like he was playing me. But I felt like if one of those girls is his girlfriend, they've seen me and I'm sure she feels the same way. One night I made a complete ass out of myself, though. I saw them together. And being the kind of person I am, not to mention having a little too much liquor in me, I went up to confront them. Now, this is when I found out she was 16. My intentions, I think, was to lay all the cards on the table so we could speak. Custer's last stand, which at one time looked as though I might end up like Custer. The battle, although not physical, seemed to be lost because he denied even knowing me. My friends, however, were there to sweep in and swoop me away. I was mad and hurt, and to my astonishment, when I woke up the next day, I realized I had ended up breaking my hand. Come to find out, I'd been so angry that on the way home I'd hit a brick wall, and it was obviously too hard. Okay, so I was stupid. I admit that. I do. Looking back, that was that was the time that I should have chose a different path. Number one, I was drinking a lot. And German liquor does some of the strongest liquor out there. And to somebody that was pretty weak in the States, going to Germany and drinking their liquor is a completely different thing. And beer was like Kool-Aid. So, yeah, it was really rough on me. But I would use that as an excuse, except there's no excuse. Number one, too many red flags. I should have walked away the very minute I met him and figured out that he was a player. Excuse me. But that's the truth. I should have. Because I remember thinking, he's playing me. And I should have walked away then. That should have been my card to say, nope, not doing this shit. I'm too old for this. And I should have got my ass home to my husband and did like I originally thought. Come back to the States with him and then decide if it was worth going any farther. But at least I would be back in the States. I could get a job. I could have friends. It was going to be a lot different than being in the military. So that's the way I saw it. But I didn't. You know, there's my sign. I saw the red flag. I saw the path that I was taking, and I should have turned around and went a different way. But I didn't. I was so infatuated with him. I remember I just thought, oh my gosh, like my heart is beating out of my chest. And he's telling me all the right stuff at the same time he's telling me all the wrong stuff. So, yeah, he's a player, but I think I got this. And so, yeah, that night when I met her, I didn't know she was 16. She looked maybe 18. And he was quick to jump in, quick to say he didn't know me, quick to come over to me and say, don't you say a word. Walk away. He knew I was old enough and gutsy enough to punch her. But, and I was drunk enough. He knew I was like that way. And he knew that she was far too young to be on the street talking to him that late at night, and it would get her in a whole bunch of trouble. But at the time, I didn't know she was 16. He later told me, you know, you just tried to beat up a 16-year-old. And she could get in a lot of trouble. You could get in a lot of trouble. You could get your husband in a lot of trouble. Don't be an idiot. You know. So, yeah, I learned all that. But I was stupid. Pure stupidity. And actually, it's not Kyle and our marriage falling apart that makes me feel so stupid. It it's the fact that I got into that full on with my eyes open, seeing red flags and all. I just should have never done that. I should have come back to the States and found a normal guy and left Kyle and got a divorce and lived happily ever after with somebody that was decent. But at that time, yeah, I didn't. And maybe I saw something in him, but to be honest, nah. I probably saw something in him, but trust me, I was married to him. I should have walked away, and I didn't. What was I doing? I was married, although it wasn't going to last. Couldn't I see that this wasn't going to get me anywhere? I should have just waited till I got back to the States. Didn't I just say that? Divorce Kyle and start a whole new life. For what? The fourth time? This was a dead end. He wasn't going to be with me, and this wasn't going to be what I needed in my life or my kids' lives. Everyone was telling me to find a captain or a warrant officer so as not to go down in rank but up. And at the time, to be honest, I knew he was a specialist, which is the same as Mark was. But as I said, when me and Gabby were together, rank really meant nothing to me or her. Yeah, my husband was an E6, but the military wasn't necessarily where I wanted to stay. I wanted to not be in the military as a military spouse. I wanted to get back home and not necessarily my home, but get back to the States and get a job again and I don't know, get a divorce and live on my own. Things just would have gone so much better for me if I'd done that. But stupid is as stupid does, and that was me. Okay, so everyone said to forget about this young single man. After all, he was a loner. He would never want to be saddled with an older woman, not to mention 3 small kids. Okay, so maybe I should have listened. But the reality is, I didn't. His name was Phil, and once I started to pursue him, it seemed as though he started to tease me, just to see how far I'd go, something that irritated me immensely. After all, I wasn't a young girl, I was a grown woman, and I didn't like childish tactics. However, I did find myself playing along when I probably should have said my goodbyes, adios, and don't ever call me again. Phil seemed to play on my needs, as he knew what I wanted. However, I would always get vague answers to my questions. When, where, I never seemed to know, but when I least expected, there he was, usually holding a long stem red rose. He was like wild but yet romantic, a party animal, but yet we were always alone. He talked on the walks in the rain, snuggled while watching TV, ate popcorn with me. I got messages from him were a constant coaster ride. I'd get messages, I remember, that said, are you coming out tomorrow night? I want to see you. I want to be with you. wear this, you know, and he would show up with a long stem red rose, kiss me, grab my butt, stroke my hair, dance with me until wee hours of the morning. It was like I was his girl, but I didn't know if he was still seeing her because, like I said, she didn't come out anyway. I didn't know that if he was or he wasn't. I just saw him and me as kind of being couple, a couple that walks in, and yeah, a lot of it was his stick, but they accepted me. And so when I walked in with him, everybody said hi to me, everybody said hi to him, and we had like a little group that followed us. Anyway, sometimes when we were out, he was an arrogant papa's ass. And when we were amongst friends, he would mention how he was a stud and had more than he knew what to do with. The truth was, he was, I guess, somewhat of a stud, but only because he acted as though he was a godsend to women. And that wasn't an attractive characteristic by far. However, when he wasn't boasting his praises, he was definitely the one that every woman wanted to be chasing after. On the other hand, when we were alone, Phil was the sweetest, loving, caring man that I'd ever met, making it seem as though the way he acted when we were out was a deception tactic. Like I said, it was a stick. Because when we were together, yeah, he did all the right things. He was very romantic. And part of that probably was still the stick. But he was calmer. He cooked for me. He met my kids. He was nice. He was normal acting. But when we were out or he met somebody that he knew, he'd snap into this, like, I don't care personality, and that, you know, when you going to be out? Gotcha. Getcha. You know, and the kind that points fingers and says little notes of things. He just had a stick about him. Pure and simple. Making it look as though he was wild and untamed, but I knew the truth. When we were alone, he was warm and considerate, and said things about how much he always wanted the family that I had, the kids, how he wanted someone to share his life with, and how he felt as though I was the person he'd been searching for. So you see, I did see something in him a long time ago when I first met him. And it did seem as though I was on the right track. But now, looking back after all the pain and agony, yeah, no, I wasn't on the right track. And I should have run the other way. I should have run the other way. Pure and simple. So you see, I did see something in him. Yeah, well, that's no, not the right thing to say. But I wrote it. He loved my kids and he made me feel alive. I fell in love with him. He told me I was like a sponge, trying to soak up as much love and affection as I could, wanting someone desperately to hold on to and comfort me. He seemed to touch not only my heart but my soul. Phil gave me the attention I had so longed for. Had my search for a prince finally come to an end? I can remember when he said that I was like a sponge. I can remember it exactly. We were laying on the couch together. We were making out. My husband was gone at that moment in the field. That's what it's called when they go out and do maneuvers. So my husband was gone. He was with me and I was enjoying it. You know, I was enjoying the attention. Um, I'll admit I was making a huge mistake. But when he said that about me being a sponge, I thought to myself, I am. I am trying to soak up all the attention and love I can get because I've been doing that my entire life. He, on the other hand, wasn't getting a plain Jane either. I was very good looking, and some even considered me hot. I definitely didn't look my age. Most of his friends said they would have jumped through hoops to have a chance to be with me, and he had me. We looked like the perfect couple. Both of us were good dancers. We liked all the same things, and as far as our sex life, it was hot. Actually, hot doesn't even describe it or come close to describing it. It was more like steamy. Phil and I shared a lot of good times and only a few bad. Well, that's kind of an understatement because now looking back, there was a lot more red flags than I could have ever thought of. But I was so taken that yeah, I saw some of the red flags. I don't know that I saw them all, and I don't know that I could have stopped myself. But I should have. It was over between Kyle and me, and although I didn't know if Phil and I would stay together, for now he did seem like to be an item, or we did seem like to be an item. Kyle left the house, and when I asked him to and for the most part without protest, I guess he knew it was over. He did, however, try to talk me into giving just one more chance, like I told you before. He did try to beg me to stay. I told him it was just too late and I wanted us to remain friends. But I couldn't pretend I love him when I didn't. I never meant to hurt him. It was just falling apart for us and there was no way to repair it. Hold on a second. So I'm going to stop here um, and I will finish on the next episode.